Non mi
Everybody, here we are for the last part of our Gnosticism versus Incarnation series. This is part 5, and we're going to talk about music. Now, sorry it's taken me over a month since I released part 4, which was on booze. So although all appearances may tell you that I was on a month-long drinking binge after my talk on alcohol, the fact is that we have been busy moving. We are now residents of sunny Portland, Oregon. So here we are back again with the Jesus Trip, and I would encourage you to watch all parts of this series to get a handle on this. This heresy of Gnosticism, it draws a dualism between the spiritual realm and the natural realm. And it goes so far as to say that the spiritual realm is good, but the natural realm is evil. And this is the bread and butter of religion. Now, historically, music is another commodity that has always taken a big hit from religious Gnosticism. Now, the Jewish people, they never historically had a problem with this Gnostic stuff. David, he was a wild worshiper. He invented all sorts of instruments by himself. Levites, they were paid worshipers who played instruments around the clock, around the Ark of the Covenant. We see Jesus singing a hymn. In the Gospels, in the early church, they wrote tons of new music. But Gnosticism began to slip in the early church, and Clement of Alexandria, one of the church fathers, he's one of these guys who fought hard against Gnosticism, but little did he realize that it was slipping right into the back door of some of his own theology. He would say things like that we should not use natural instruments in our worship because that's what the pagans do. Well, I suppose we should cut the noses off of our faces as well because pagans also have those. Clement of Alexandria, he took Psalm 150 and he tried to spiritualize all the instruments. That's where David's saying, worship the Lord with guitars and cymbals and, xylophones and all this kind of stuff. In Clement, he says, now we are those instruments. And so he sort of spiritualized this. Now, yes, we have become instruments, and perhaps that is a higher rendering of the psalm, but that does not discount the natural order. Do you see the Gnosticism here? He's saying that because instruments are natural, they must be evil. So, religion gradually made inroads against music, as it does all the fun stuff in life. Pope Gregory, around the 5th century, he came up with the Gregorian chants. Now, we all like chants. Chants are pretty cool, but if that's the only music you were allowed to listen to, you probably wouldn't enjoy them as much. He did not allow any melody or scale outside of this tiny little framework. There was no creativity. It was illegal to sing anything outside of women. Eventually were not even allowed to sing in church, and then only the paid clergy were allowed to worship. Martin Luther, on the other hand, he loved music. He was radically different from the other reformers. You had Calvin going around Europe burning down pipe organs. He only allowed singing. He didn't allow instruments. You had Zwingli, who disallowed music altogether, even though he himself was a musician. They considered the arts to be purely secular. But Luther, he was a totally different bird altogether. He played instruments, he wrote songs, he loved the arts. He had 2 painters that would paint portraits beside him, paint all sorts of things while he preached. Check this out. This is a quote from Martin Luther. He says, "Music is a fair and lovely gift of God, which has often wakened and moved me to the joy of preaching. St. Augustine was troubled in conscience whenever he caught himself delighting in music, which he took to be sinful. He was a choice spirit, and were he living today, would agree with us." That's what Luther says. He says that Augustine would have turned tail and changed his mind about music if he had been with us today. Luther said this. this. He says, I have no use for cranks who despise music because it is a gift of God. Music drives away the devil and makes people happy. They forget thereby all wrath, unchastity, arrogance, and the like. Next, after theology, I give to music the highest place and the greatest honor. I would not exchange what little I know of music for something great. Luther continues, he says, experience proves that next to the Word of God, only music deserves to be extolled as the mistress and governess of the feelings of the human heart. We know that to the devil, music is distasteful and sufferable. My heart bubbles up and overflows in response to music, which has so often refreshed me and delivered me from dire plagues. Okay, here's the deal, guys. This idea of music being an expression of personal creativity and that it's pleasing to God, it opened a door for all sorts of guys like Bach, Handel, Haydn, Mendelssohn, all these classical composers. They were writing this stuff to the glory of God. Every awakening, every movement, every revival, it had a sound to it. Charles Wesley, in the First Great Awakening, he wrote thousands of hymns. William Booth, the guy who founded the Salvation Army, he said, why should the devil have the best tunes? And so he went out and he took these bar tunes, this bar music of the day, and he turned it into worship songs. Handel's Messiah, he played this in secular music halls. Now that was a scandalous thing to play sacred music in these secular theaters. And it was such a scandal that people tried to shut him down because of it. But after he was locked himself away for days in his room writing the Messiah, when he came out of it, the first people saw him that said he was in ecstasy. And he said, I have seen the very face of God. Here's the thing. Every new movement has a sound. The gospel has a frequency to it. And I am sick and tired of these old covenant begging songs, singing from the wrong side of the cross. People begging God to reaccomplish what He's already done. Let me tell you that as people start to get hold of grace, they start to get hold of the gospel, we are going to begin to hear a new sound. We are going to hear new lyrics. Rather than begging God to reaccomplish something, we're going to be celebrating what Christ has already done. Look at some of the garbage that we sing. Look at these songs, take me into the Holy of Holies. Well, where do you think you already are? Or how about this one? Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary. And he says, where do you think I live? Or how about this one? Create in me a clean heart. I gave you a new one. Or how about this one? Purify my heart. Didn't you hear what I said? I've already given you a new one. Here's the thing. The theology and most of these Christian songs we sing is absolutely crap. Now, I know that you were touched at one point by some of these songs. You probably know all the lyrics. But it wasn't because of the theology in these songs that you were touched. It was in spite of the theology that God touched you. Just because you have these things memorized, that's the thing. What do you think when we get these lyrics like this just lodged into our brain? This message of postponement and delay and God's over there and I'm not clean and He hasn't finished the job. As we get this stuff just chock full of us, it starts to build this idea of a distance that no longer exists. We are about to see finished work musicians. But to be honest with you, see, I don't listen to Christian music, not one iota. I can hit the scan button in the radio in the car and I can tell when a Christian song is coming on by the very first lyric. Or before the first lyric, by the first guitar chord, I can just feel the creativity just get sucked out of the car. See, religion is a copy. It is shadows, just like the old covenant was a shadow. The other day, we were scanning through the radio. We were driving along with a family, and a Spanish station came on. And immediately, I said, that's Christian. Not because it was good, and not because I understood the lyrics, because I don't speak Spanish. It's just that I could feel everything dry up, and it had that religious copycat feel to it. And certain enough, after a few lines, As we got into the song, I started to recognize a few of the minute Christian words that I do know in the Spanish language. There's no creativity in Christian music. Since most Christians don't believe the gospel, they just get caught up in vain repetition and all this legalistic begging, and their so-called art is religiously motivated, mimicking garble. It is rarely authentically innovative. It lacks fundamental creativity. Everybody's trying to make their worship band sound like Nirvana or sound like Coldplay. Why don't you just listen to Coldplay? They're the ones with the whack on them. The only time you see innovative Christian music is when he's playing to a secular crowd rather than under a Christian label, like U2 or something. The church can't recognize the glory on the real stuff because it doesn't sound like the Hosanna song that they've already memorized. What if we got free from all of our dualisms between secular and sacred? We don't need to have a strained religious phrase inserted every other stanza. This is beyond just having better theology in our worship songs. What if we started to see that music itself, whether it has a Bible verse in it or not, it is all to the glory of God. Just glorifying God in life, living life, no separation between spiritual and natural. I find secular music to be much more anointed and prophetic at times, although I may not agree verbatim with all the words, or the writer may not even had a clue of any biblical parallels when he was writing his song. He was probably just enjoying being creative, and somehow God sang through the guy's unbelieving lips because there was something of a communication of authenticity and truth in what he was experiencing, not just mouthing a doctrine. One of the first things that struck me as a new believer was how absolutely hokey and talentless the Christian music industry was. How everyone was trying so hard, and it was obvious that they were all trying so hard. And as a new believer, I could just see that the true essence of creativity and innovative thinking, it didn't exist in this stuff at all. I thought CCM was a joke, still do, and I was ashamed of it, still am. And that was probably the core of it all, a lack of authenticity. It wasn't real. Now, that doesn't have to be the case. You can argue that every form of modern music has its origin in the church. Every genre of rock and roll, jazz, blues, hip hop, all of that stuff stemmed out of Pentecostalism and black gospel music. Any musicologist could tell you that. Even country, bluegrass, that stuff came out of Scottish Presbyterians and the Appalachians. All this stuff came out of different streams of the church. We possess within us the divine creative nature of God to create whole new genres of music. We as believers should possess more creative potential than anyone else. You know, at one point, think like Middle Ages, Renaissance, the church was the creative art center of the community. Will that be the case again? Well, only when we become Catholic. And I don't mean Roman Catholic. I mean Catholic in the sense of seeing this gospel message not as some sectarian flavor for a select few, but as a universal message that it is, that has impacted the whole of humanity, whether they realize it or not. We have to stop putting dividing lines between Christian and secular. God doesn't see believer and unbeliever. He sees one sacrifice on behalf of humanity. And it must be incarnational. Jesus stepped in and assumed the created order into the divine life. God is transcendent, yes, but we must see God in the natural order of things incarnationally. Only then will our eyes be open to the wonder of the sacred in the everyday life and our spirituality expressed musically through the created order, as in many other areas. Besides some backward denomination in Arkansas, most Christians don't demonize music anymore. We don't demonize drums as being pagan jungle music or whatever. But there are still folks who can't listen to it if it's not Christian. we still have these unnecessary dualisms in our head. We can't just listen to music for what it is and enjoy God's presence even when something secular is playing. I'm not saying that we should be obsessed with sexually explicit lyrics or druggy stuff or depressed, rage-fueled lyrics or whatever, but even then, I just hear people crying out for something that only the Lord can fulfill. Most of that kind of music lacks originality anyway. It bores me. I can enjoy the melodies without biting off the doctrine. I mean, I've had to do the same thing in church for years. So, yes, we can enjoy music without feeding off of ungodly worldviews. And yes, there's plenty of music that I avoid, not because I'm afraid of demons or something. I avoid it out of total disinterest. I ultimately don't feed off any music, church or secular. Music doesn't kill my buzz. I feed off of the Lord. But I enjoy good music. It's a God-given thing to exhilarate the soul. And I would prefer silence over bad music. I spend many more hours in silence than in music, but that's out of preference, not out of obligation. Music is a gift to enhance our faith. Music is a gift in this world to be enjoyed. And as G.K. Chesterton says, somehow one must love the world without being worldly. Music, like all these other natural world things, money, sex, beer, it's a gift from God to carry His glory. There's a proper place for it. It doesn't mean everything you sing needs to be a hymn, but we should have eyes to see the glory of God even in our celebration of natural music. Love you guys, and we'll be back again next week.
We've got some fun events coming your way, so visit our homepage to find out more. Our only East Coast USA school is in Pennsylvania from the 2nd of August to the 4th. Our only German-speaking school is in Austria from the 20th to the 22nd of September. And our only Southern Fried school is in Birmingham, Alabama from the 4th to the 6th of October. Find them all at thenewmystics.com/schools. Also, Sloshfest is finally making its way to the Southland. The drunken duo John Crowder and Dave Vaughan will be coming to 5 cities in Australia and New Zealand this summer, in November and December for Sloshfest Down Under. Register early at sloshfest.com as we expect it to fill up. John and Dave will also be bringing the party to Singapore and Malaysia for Gloryfest Asia in August. Registration information is also at sloshfest.com. And don't forget, Sloshy is coming back to England as Sloshfest Europe kicks off in London November the 1st to the 3rd with Joanne Greville and Godfrey Birtle. Warning, if you have a religious spirit, it will manifest at these events. Finally, make sure to order John Crowder's new book release, The Cosmos Reborn, together with Lily Crowder's new book, Grace for Contemplative Parenting, Mothers in the Presence of God. Find them both at thenewmystics.com/books.